meetings, but it's in the my teaching realm, and there are people that I know most of the time. So it's funny, I was sitting here waiting for the meeting to start, and all these faces and names started to show up, and I kind of went, oh, I don't know these people. So yeah, because yeah. So anyway, it's wonderful to see faces and people that I don't know. And I really appreciate you, Hope, for this gathering, and of course, all your amazing work. And I really honor you and what you bring to the world. Thank you so much. And all of the people who study with you, we're all making a difference. Like you said, with the UN, the more communities I'm exposed to, the more hopeful I get, regardless of the stuff that we see in the world, the shadows, the fear, all of that. We do more of this. And I'm getting chills. We do more of this because that's how we're going to make the change, bringing in more light.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And I love that our circle is growing as a result of these kinds of meetings. And, I want people to know about you and all the things that you do that I don't do. And, we're all being educated. We're all expanding and learning. So I think it's exciting to me. It's exciting to me. So let's start with your beautiful story and take us back. How'd this all begin with you? Were one of those kids who saw little beings underneath the bushes, or what?
You know, um, yeah, sort of. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
As a child, I grew up on a lake in Connecticut, and it was barely developed. There was a dirt road for many years, and across the lake was nothing but trees and whatever. And we lived in a place where there were a lot of really large rocks that had come through with the glaciers, and they were great fun to explore. And that was the time in the world where my mom would say, come in when the streetlights come on. We would just roam the neighborhood otherwise. But I was very, very much in touch with nature, and swimming in the summer and skating in the winter. But a friend of mine and I explored. She was an explorer like me, and I don't think I would have done it without her. I really, we sort of adventured into places we wouldn't have gone without a partner holding our hand. And one time we found a cave, and all of the rock is black granite, and the road that ran by was called Black Rock Road. But we went into this place, and because the cave was black, it was really dark, but there was a little bit of light at our back, and we just kind of crept in tiny, tiny, tiny steps as our eyes got used to it. And then we could pick out other rocks inside the cave. And as I looked closer, I saw a rock with a shallow, long rock with an indentation in it. And I didn't know what a metate was, but I knew that somebody had made that. And so I sort of crept up to it because I didn't want to step on anything. And I touched it, and it electrified me.
Oh
And
my.
I know I wasn't getting any like shocks from a carpet or anything. And it literally knocked me on my ass. I just like, wow. And what I came to know in many years later was that I was dipping into a past life experience there. And no wonder I came back to that area so I could, find that again and sort of enculturate myself in that outdoorsy kind of thing. Of course, this is where I ended up coming to as a kid because this is where I had been, or this or something like it. So that was always a theme, was the outdoors. And anywhere I went after that, I had to live with land around, or at least be able to walk to a creek or something. So that kept going. And I lived in Maine, I lived in British Columbia, and then I lived in Alaska for many years on the land, and really didn't know anything about it.
What
The little
brought you
Connecticut
there?
girl.
What brought you to?
Actually, it was after Woodstock that bunch of us decided to leave the country, and that's why we went to British Columbia. But of course, they didn't want a bunch of hippies there, so we got kicked out. But we wanted to get away from the government, and really, Watergate happened, and we really felt like the whole thing was going to collapse. So we wanted to live on the land and be able to take care of ourselves. And so we did, in, little pods of places. But I ended up with a friend of mine who I later married, which wasn't really a good idea, on a little piece of property that had belonged to the natives on the Yukon River. And we built a log cabin. We'd never done anything like that. We had a book on how to build a log cabin.
My goodness.
Someone in Connecticut told us about this. And we just did it. It just was like the next right thing to do. And I know we put ourselves in really vulnerable positions. I was 22 doing that. And, I didn't see my family for years. I had to learn how to fire a rifle and
Wow.
put food and grow a garden. And we actually trapped animals for fur. And, we just completely invented this life. And there was nobody that told us that we couldn't.
Mm.
And, my parents, of course, were like, what are you going to do out there? You've never done anything like that. And, that just sort of washed over. And that has really been a theme. Like, you've never done anything like this. That doesn't mean you can't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And not that we weren't reckless. We didn't go 50 miles into the wilderness where you couldn't get to anybody. We went 10, and and still the river was the only road, and no electricity, no running water, all of that, and dogs and dog sleds and all of that. But nobody told me I couldn't. And as a really young child, I was raised to be a wife, very Catholic, very, Adam and Eve. Eve was the sinner and the woman with the first, eating disorder, and you'll never amount to much. Just be a wife and be happy. Don't make waves and all of that. So escaping that was great. And going to a place where I could actually see that even though I've never done this, I could do it.
Wow.
And it didn't always happen right the first time. Like the first roof we made leaked, things like that. We never burned anything down. We never got, bear. Well, we did have a bear walk into our camp, but, the wolves didn't get us, any of those, kinds of things you hear about that kind of life. But we could do this. There wasn't anybody saying, you're not going to be able to do this. And there wasn't anybody saying, here's how to do it either. Although the natives in the nearest village were really happy because all of their kids had left, their kids our age, because they didn't want to live that way anymore. They didn't want to live without running water and electricity. They'd lived that way their whole lives. So the natives were really happy to show us, how to catch the salmon in the river and things like that. But it was not because somebody said you could do this. It's because no one said that you can't. And I feel like that's been a theme in my life. And I know that's been a theme for a lot of us who, hear these voices that tell us, this is something that needs to happen, or maybe, we see some art, or we hear some music, or one of our friends talk about something, and it sparks something in us. And it's like follow that crumb, follow that trail, and see where it leads, even if you've never done it before, ever. My life is a story of things I've never done before. And I know we can all do that. And it's only our culture that has told us we have to be in this box. With the work that you've brought through Hope, no one's ever done that. And, but now you did it. And who knows what's next for any of us, for all of us. We're all embodying our gifts in a way that we've never, well, not never, we haven't known for thousands of years. But as my story unfolds, it really comes to the time once again where I was asked to host Lee Carroll for a Kryon event in Boulder. And I'd never done anything like that. And I said, okay, let's do it.
Let me just make sure. Okay. So everybody here probably knows who Lee Carroll is, I'm assuming. Let's see. I'm pretty sure I see a lot of nodding heads. For those who don't know, Lee has been really at the forefront, one of the most prolific channelers of the being Kryon for 30 years.
34.
34 years, and still going, right?
Yeah.
Still going. He's quite prolific, obviously. Kryon is very interesting voice, very interesting message. I'm curious how, when you say you were asked to be a host, does that mean open up your home and he can come to your home? Or does that mean find a venue for 500 people? What was that about, and why were you asked to do that?
Well, I was asked to do that because he trusted me, because my husband, my beloved, knew him from California. And it's really, it's like watching puzzle pieces drop into place. I was living in New Mexico. I got divorced and moved to Colorado. Found my first Kryon book in a used bookstore, a metaphysical bookstore. I was fiddling with the books, and this book fell off the shelf and hit me in my toe. It was summer and I was barefoot, and I was, yeah, okay, you got my attention. So I started reading the Kryon books, and I said, yeah. But I never thought to go to where he was or to find out anything. No internet. We're talking 1989, right? So, but then a few years later, when I met Sid, he was Lee's friend. And so we went to a Kryon event in Santa Fe, and Sid introduced me to Lee, who was the exact same warm, funny, kind person then as he is now. So that was in like 1998 that I met Lee. And so he's been channeling. He started out in people's living room, and it was called Kryon at Home. But at that point he was at hotels. So yes, for me to produce the event was at a hotel in Boulder, because that's where I lived near. It was Boulder, Colorado. And I did that every year for 2-3 years. And then he asked me to also, Sid and I, to be facilitators of the Journey Home event, which was created after one of his books, which is The Journey of Michael Thomas, and the near life journey of Michael Thomas. So I had never hosted a 4-day event or produced a 4-day event where we had to, supply food and rooms and, coordinate all the transportation and all that. But I said, okay. And it was great. And then that became the Discovery event, and Sid and I still facilitated and produced that. And then that came to a halt. And in 2010, I picked up Lee to to do our January event in 2010 in Boulder, and he asked me if I wanted to go on the road with him and travel and be a part of what he presents. And for me, that was nothing I would have ever asked. And that's also a sort of a part of my story, is that I really didn't ask for these things, but there they were. And of course, I said yes. And so we started traveling that year. And in,
But let me ask a quick question, if I
yeah,
could.
yeah.
At that point, were you, where were you in your spirituality? Had you done some training by then? Were you, or were you just kind of, where were you?
Okay. So I had a psychology degree at that point. I'd been a massage therapist. I was a cranial sacral therapist. I did a lot of counseling with people. I did a lot of one-on-one things. I really wanted to facilitate women's groups. That was my heart. And I did that once a year. I'd invite my patients and my yoga students. I taught yoga and Pilates, and um, we would have a gathering. So I had also moved from Colorado from an ashram in New Mexico. So I lived 6 years there. My son was born there, and we lived outside Santa Fe and worked in Santa Fe. So spirituality, I've always been a seeker, always been a seeker. It was not immediate because I was still the recovering Catholic. But one of the things that Kryon said that really got me was the honoring of the human. And I had never heard that. I had no idea. It just stopped me in my tracks, really. Why would God or anybody honor a human? God, Kryon, any entity. And so in that exploration, I started to realize that I was really healing from the Catholic stuff of, we're not worthy. Um, and that really made a difference in my life. That made a huge difference. And I will always be grateful for that moment of, what? You're honoring you up there, you limitless being, are honoring our little puny, mistake laden selves down here on the earth. And then I learned more about how we have contracts to come here and soul families. And so I was, always, always, always studying. And as you said, with my CV, it looks like I'm as old as a tree to have gotten all that stuff done.
Oh, I didn't mean it that way.
Well, it's pretty true. But I just kept saying yes as those opportunities were presented. And they were amazing opportunities. And in 9/11, 9/11, I had an Akashic awakening. I had an experience. I'm not really big on past life regressions, and this was sort of for me to have a little crow pie along with my session, because this really good friend of mine who had been treating me for years with massage and cranial work did a past life regression one day, and it was the awakening of my Lemurian Akash, my soul memory, my time in Lemuria. So when I told Lee about it, he said, "Oh, that's great, because here's what I want you to do. When we are in South America for 11/11/11, I want you to have a women's meeting there, because that's where you're going with this." And I said, "Okay." Do a meeting that I've never done in a language that I don't speak. Nothing's wrong with that, right? Just say yes. And it was great. And I had a great translator, and the women were they still are my friends. They still touch my heart. And that was 11/11. We just passed 11/11/24. So 13 years ago. Yeah. So that really shifted things for me. And I didn't know what I was saying yes to, but that's where the Lemurian Sisterhood started, because I recognized that I had had a life in Lemuria. And
Well,
then my
let's talk
husband,
about that. Let's
yeah,
talk about that awakening and what was revealed to you in that
yeah.
past life
Well,
regression.
again, there was with the help of Kryon. When my beloved Sid passed in 2013, it was 2 or 3 days before the Kryon event in Boulder. And so I was pretty much knocked out. But everyone, my family was there, and it was a time to honor this amazing life of this person. And people were very kind and supportive. And then a whole year went by. I was traveling with Lee still, and hearing, when you think about listening to a channel, you usually just listen to one. I just usually listen to one. But on these weekends with Kryon, there were three, sometimes four. So I was in that energy all weekend, every weekend, probably 3 weekends a month for years.
Wow, wow.
So, yeah. And he would come to the Lemurian Sisterhood meetings. So that started in 2014, where he asked me at the Boulder yearly Boulder event, I was going to have a meeting of women, and he asked me, did I want a message from Kryon, and that because it had been a year, that it was time. And so in that message, he talked about what I did in Lemuria, which I really had no idea about, and what my name was, and that I was the last priestess of Lemuria, the last woman that was of Pleiadian and Lemurian descent, and the last teacher before Lemuria went through its physical transition from a small continent into the Hawaiian Islands.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was another sort of wave in the trail, and really brought my mission more into focus. And after a few years of doing these meetings all over the world, along with the Kryon events, we were on almost every continent, I think. People started saying, well, what should we do when you're gone? You're only here once every 2 years, because that was sort of our schedule. It was every 2 years we'd go back around and we'd present a new program. And so I started a program called the Emissary Program, so women could become part of a community that I was sort of the overseer of, that they could have their own Lemurian Sisterhood meetings wherever. And we've had a big contingency in South America. We've had Australia, New Zealand, all over the US, Canada, Prague, Taiwan, Korea, China. Let's see if I miss anything, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
All over the world. And that really started to spread the teachings of the Pleiadian Star Mothers. I created a CD of music that was given to me by the Star Mothers of the songs we sang in Lemuria. So campfire songs, they're pretty simple and very beautiful and inspiring. And I used to have the women sing those during our meetings and our live meetings. And that was, it's just so healthy to sing. When you said you began with singing, I was like, yeah, it really is. And we celebrate that way. We celebrate each other and our community. So it became really evident to me that community was so important. And the Star Mothers started really sending messages through me. At the same time, Kryon had been doing these channels every weekend all over the world, and they were collected, 4 years worth, and made into a book. Monica Morani, Lee's partner, edited all of them and put them into a book. So my Akashic Awakening and my Lemurian Sisterhood and Lee's channels and Monica's editing created this book called Women of Lemuria. And it gives a really concise history of Lemuria, the way that Kryon and the Star Mothers have told it.
I see.
Yeah.
So, but somewhere along the line, they started to speak to you directly, right?
Yeah.
Not through Lee. So let's talk about how that happened.
You know, it's funny because I had one date in mind where that happened, but really, as I look back, it happened way before that because they were giving me guidance about these songs. They were giving me guidance about this card deck for awakening the star centers in the body, and I wasn't really saying their words weren't coming out of my mouth yet, but they were speaking to me all that time. And then one meeting, one night in some city, in some hotel, I got it. I got it that they had they would have consistent messages they already had. It was me in my smallness next to the big guy that I couldn't possibly be channeling anything because,
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't my job. And then it was just, it was an aha moment. And I see them as, waiting, 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 waiting really patiently. I mean, it wasn't a 2x4 moment at all. It was a moment where the divide disappeared. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't me and the products and the messages. It all became one. And it's just kept going from there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I getting these messages from the Star Mother or Star Mothers rather, first through Lee, and then but they must have resonated with you because, as you say, they were coming in before you
Yeah.
acknowledged it.
Yeah.
And then when they did come in for you and you realize, oh, I've been hearing you all along, that's something I experienced also. And I encourage other people to tune in just a little more carefully because they're probably hearing guidance too, either guidance or messages or whatever. It's all there, but I realized it was in the background, and I had all this stuff going on in the foreground. I just wasn't paying attention to what was in the background until it moved into the foreground. And then it's like, oh, I know you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? So let's talk about what I know that so many of the people on the call tonight and people who will be watching the video, the recording of this, were either at Mount Shasta with our group in August or tuning in with us. We had people around the world tuning in with us with that moment that, we were all driving towards and not knowing what it was going to be at all. But God bless them all. We knew it had to do with freedom of some sort, but we didn't know anything else.
Mm.
So I think because of the relationship between Mount Shasta and Lemuria, and of course, many of us maybe have heard the stories or have heard various, maybe even conflicting stories. I would love to hear from you
Mm.
more about Lemuria as if people don't know anything, and then the connection between Lemuria and Shasta.
Okay. So, if you drink this Kool-Aid, in this story, the Pleiadian Star Mothers made a consensual agreement with the people of Lemuria. Now, this goes back 200,000 years, where the Pleiadian consciousness came from a place where they had experienced ascension. So now it was their turn to bring that to another place that was ready. Mm-hmm. So what they did was contact 12 places on the earth. And they actually brought time capsules of energy to those places and just deposited them. Mm-hmm. And Lemuria was the first one. And they came in their star bodies, but they were able to create physical bodies. I don't know how much they had to slow their vibration down, but I'm assuming a lot. Mm-hmm. And the idea was to create humans that were Pleiadian and Lemurian, so that they were divine and human. And that is what would bring this planet into its next level, its own ascension. So if you figure there were seven sisters in the Star Mother cluster that are visible, we call them the Seven Sisters. And the Star Mothers actually had physical pregnancies, physical births, and then did it again and around and kept, and the ones that were born would also mate and have more children. And what happened with that was there was a spark of DNA that came to live in all of us that were there. And I asked Kryon this question once about, if you were first generation Star Mother human and you had 50-50 DNA, did you have to marry or did you have to mate with someone that was 50-50 to keep that going? And did it like peter out as the further away you got from the source? And Kryon said no, that once that DNA was anchored in a human, it didn't matter how much or how little it was. So I thought that was really interesting, because our idea, is that the further away you get from the source, the more diluted it gets.
Right.
But apparently not so. So the Lemurians that were there already were very high functioning. They had a society where they had teachers and healers, and they, built their shelters, and they made medicine, and they had a way of communicating all around the continent. They made boats and went fishing and had fishing ponds in the island so that they could feed. They had agriculture. They were doing great. And that's the reason that the Star Mothers said, let's see if these guys say yes. And they did. So as time went on, so if we talk 200,000 years and, really creating a field where all this could happen, and holding that field was up to the Star Mothers. And now in my latest download from them, they're giving me information about what the Star Fathers actually did, that it wasn't the women, that of course the men needed to be doing what they were doing to create a balance in a place where everyone could thrive. And that was the idea, that you could thrive. And so as time went on, the education went from really basic to much more spiritual and more, I don't want to say the word finite, but like that, graduate levels of education and information. And one of the first things that was the Lemurian teaching wheel that the Star Mothers gave to Kryon, and Kryon brought through Lee in 2017 when I was sitting with him on the stage in the Big Island in Lemuria at an adventure called The Return to Lemuria. And a beautiful woman named Kahuna Kale Iliahi was there also. And Kryon said he was pulling on the Akash of the women on either side of me. And so from that came the original teaching method of the Star Mothers called the Lemurian teaching wheel. And it's a 5-spoke wheel, very much like the one I'm wearing. And when that was about halfway in, we were in Jacksonville, Florida, and Lee and Monica and I sat down just to, I thought, deprogram, debrief from our day. And Lee said, Kryon has a message from you from the Star Mothers. And Monica said, you may want to take notes. And so I recorded this. And it was the shamanic teaching wheel. And what that is how we women only graduated from the Lemurian teaching wheel and went on. So like bachelor's, master's, PhD kind of things. And it wasn't for everybody, and that was okay. So after he gave me that, we went right into COVID. So I wasn't really doing anything with it until I found Mindy and Jenny, or they found me, because I really needed a team to help bring this through. And they still to this day are magnificent, wonderful women on my team. So that was 2 years of bringing through that information, side 1 and side 2 of the shamanic teaching wheel. And each spoke has a name and a purpose, and the rim and the hub all are very purposeful. So it was a very simplistic way of teaching, but also very deep and can be complex. And once that was done and we came into the year of the dragons, the Star Mother said, okay, it's the dragon wheel. It's the year of the dragon, and this is what you're doing this year. And I was like, dragons. I mean, they're nice and everything. I mean, I like the Oriental dragons. They've always met in, feng shui. I like feng shui, and they're always, the golden dragon is very auspicious and all that stuff. So I said, okay, and just waited and waited. And one day the information just started to pour through, and I wrote and wrote and wrote. I think in 48 hours, I wrote 13,000 words.
Oh my goodness.
And then then it got some serious editing, and I had to figure how to put it in a form that I could teach. And did anybody want to hear it? That was another thing, because these are all great stories, but I also make a living doing this. So it has to be of value to people. It's not really not what I sell, although I love doing that. That's wonderful, because it means people are finding something in what I'm offering that's helpful. And, if I go back to when I first started to travel with Lee, that was why he picked me to do that, is because I had practical skills. He did all the channeling, and he talked about all the far out stuff, and I taught the practical things. I taught neurolinguistic programming. I taught tapping, EFT. I taught different kinds of meditation, and I taught laughter yoga, and on and on and on, because it was the practical stuff that could give you the spiritual lessons, but you put them to practice in your everyday life. So I'm still that way. I still offer meditations and music and different ways of really, how do we make this amazing stuff that we hear and get to know, how does that help us in our everyday life?
Yeah.
And that is my double Taurus Capricorn moon delight, to make it practical.
Oh, I love that so much. Um, so, oh, darn, sorry, I'm new to spotlighting. There we go. Oh, I always used something else. I don't know. Anyway, we're here we are. Okay, so let's talk about Lemuria and Mount Shasta. And also,
Mhm.
so legend has it that Lemuria was this elevated society, as you have said, and predated and then uh, coincided, I guess predated and then overlapped with Atlantis.
Yeah.
Okay. And that Lemuria was considered to be more elevated than Atlantis, more spiritual, more pure in a way, and less aggressive, if I could use that word. Um,
I don't know. I haven't looked into or asked for much information about Atlantis. But what I do know is that, in the way I feel about it, is that it came after Lemuria and that it was always trying to recreate Lemuria.
uh-huh, uh-huh,
And it just didn't happen.
uh-huh.
It's the same consciousness was not overlaid on the planetary grid anymore. We were done with that. We were moving on. Now, of course, a lot of the stuff we moved on to wasn't so great. We moved on to conquering and witches and, feeding people to lions and all, not
We
nice
had,
things.
we also had different, I think, perhaps, don't know for sure, but different influences
Yeah.
that took us down a different path, and that the Pleiadian influences were really quite beautiful and pure, and the other influences weren't quite so much of the same caliber. Now, okay, so let's go back to, well, I have a couple things to ask. Actually, I'll ask this before we go to Shasta, and that is the DNA. And I
Yeah.
think it's fascinating that it didn't take a, a little bit of DNA to change the whole thing and to be just as strong, which
Yeah.
really talks about, I mean, that's kind of like the holographic universe, right? It's the fractal. If it's there, if it's there in the form, it's everywhere in the form, right? So I find that to be quite interesting. And the follow-up to that would be, well, there are people who still have that DNA on the planet. So I'm assuming you're one of them. I'm
Yeah. I'd
guessing.
say, yeah. Um, and, there are thousands of women in this group called Lemurian Sisterhood Global Community. And it's a Facebook group that has been going for maybe 12 years. Yeah, I think, well, maybe, yeah, somewhere in there. And each one of them, I'm the only admin that admits them. So I have seen every single question and answer of people that want to come in to this group. And one of the questions is why? And it's still amazes me 12 years later that women are saying, I just really feel like I was in Lemuria, but I don't know anything about it. Or I had a reading with someone and they said I was Lemuria. Or there's something about this that really speaks to me. I don't know what. And for me, those are all the people with Lemurian DNA. Those are all those people, and it's just starting to bubble up.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't matter some because when we used to talk about past lives, everybody was like a pharaoh or Cleopatra, and we were like these really elevated people. And one woman said to me, I'm not sure this is right, but I think I was a gardener in Lemuria. And I was so happy to hear that because I was like, of course, we had to have that. We just couldn't have a bunch of priestesses. So
Fantastic.
we all have different ways of experiencing that. And I think that's wonderful because we're unique, each one of us.
Mm,
And, to get out from that, it has to be like a mold
mm,
that, we all did this and we all did that. I mean, if we were there, if the Pleiadians were there for 200,000 years and the last 50,000 was the real, work, and I was there for the last 500, so there's 45,000 years that, who knows what I was doing. Maybe I was floating around as a fish. I don't know. I certainly do love to swim. Uh, but I think that we miss the point when we start to ask those questions.
mm.
Instead of just feeling what we're feeling and acknowledging it and honoring it and say, yeah, that feels right for me. It's not going to feel right for everybody. I think it had to be probably at least 10 years ago. So there's 8 billion people on the planet now. So there was around 7 billion then. Kryon said that there were 350 million old souls alive on the planet then who had been crossed through Lemuria.
Mm.
So if it takes less than 1/10 of 1% of people to make a difference, I think if you do the math, that's right around 350 million.
Mm, mm.
So I like that. It just makes sense to me. And again, in my practical way, everything that can be so, like I have Pleiadian DNA, I can say that because it makes sense in the here and now that those of us, I mean, look at how many sages and teachers and channelers are here now that are teaching and doing all this compared to, say, 50 years ago.
Oh, it's so true.
I
So
mean,
true.
I
Yeah.
think, being raised in the Woodstock generation as I was, there was none of that. The first thing was the Seth material. And, that was, I think I was in my 20s when that was starting to happen. So now it's like boom, 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 boom. It's everywhere because we're all feeling this. We're resonating with it. We're ready for the next Lemuria. We're ready for the age of Aquarius, which is, like Pluto entering Aquarius on Friday and all of this stuff that's happening. It's perfect timing. And we're here to make it happen, to help it happen. We're in the birth canal now doing our heavy breathing,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
midwifing this energy
Yeah.
into, yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
I see it as the next Lemuria because that's where my wheelhouse is. I see us as being able to really connect with our communities in ways that we never had as we realize how important they are, to honor people that don't think like us. I was thinking about this the other day in all the communities that I'm a part of, and they're all people that think alike. And I thought, well, how do you ever get new ideas if everybody thinks like you? And I thought, well, of course, in Lemuria, if we have a condensed version of any town, not everybody was going to think the same, just like today. And that doesn't mean that they're not part of our community. They're right there. Of course, they're part. Now, we may not want to spend as much time with them, but we can also honor the differences. I think that's really key here. As certainly my country faces a big dichotomy in what people want, that we have to honor the differences, and we have to. It's not going to help if we don't.
Right.
And we're here to be part of the solution. So
Right.
Mount Shasta.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Um, I went there in 2010. I was there on my birthday for the first time to work. And I never got to go on the mountain, but I got to see it. Now, I lived in Colorado for 33 years, right near the Rocky Mountains. They were, 45 minutes I could be in Rocky Mountain National Park. And I saw them all the time. That's where the sun set. They were just my friends. They were always there. And I was in and out of them. I was a skier. So all of that. I got to Mount Shasta and, I'd heard about it for years. And my son had a teacher that said she had to go every year to Mount Shasta. I didn't get it. I said, we have the mountains right here. They're same height, 14,000-foot mountains. Why do you need to go there? Oh, okay. So 20 years later, maybe 30. uh, so I didn't get to go on the mountain, but I got to see it. And it stands alone, which is very different, very unique to the Rocky Mountains, which are a chain of mountains, and one after another after another. And so it's very striking that way because it stands alone. And there had been a big snowstorm, okay, on May 15th. And so the mountain was covered and it had all melted in the town except for like in the parking lot of the supermarket. There was a big mound of snow where they'd plowed it. And so, we get out of the airplane into a car, go to the hotel, do our presentation, go back in a car, go back in the airplane, go home. Never got out to see the mountain. Next year, same exact thing. Ay, ay, ay. 2 years after that, there was a bigger conference that was it was a Kryon Summer Light conference outside of Mount Shasta. And so we stayed outside, some stayed in, and I found this wonderful guide, and he took me and one other person up on the mountain. And it was summer and beautiful. And, I was in shorts and a t-shirt, and I took my shoes off and was barefoot. The tree people, the tree beings and the rock beings and the magnetic field there are unlike anything I've ever felt. And as I told you, I've been around the world, and I've been to Mount Cook in New Zealand, which is another point of Pleiadian time capsule drop off, and other amazing places. Nothing has that energy. Nothing. I haven't been everywhere, but I've been to a lot of places. And I wanted to spend the night on the mountain. And it didn't matter that it was going to be, 50 degrees that night. And I didn't have water, a sleeping bag, even a shirt to put on. Didn't care. I was so magnetized to that mountain. And it was so, and the sun started to go down and it got a little chilly. And my friends were like, I think it's time to go. No, I'll be good. I'll be good. I lived in Alaska. I could do this. No, what a good idea. But after that experience, I really got it. I got why my son's teacher went there. I got that the Pleiadians were there. And I had so many more experiences. One year I went 3 times because I just had to. Yeah. And this year when I was there, I spent 2 weeks. And 1 week I was with a friend and we were just doing play things on the mountain. And the second week was my event. It was during the equinox, September. And the energy at the spots that I always go to, I experienced in a way that I have never experienced them. And I've been to them a lot, but this time something had shifted. And I kind of had to laugh when I thought of this, and I thought, the mountain hasn't shifted. Shifted. I'm awake to something that I wasn't awake to before. And that was such a wonderful gift. It was such, an affirmation that how powerful it is to be in nature. And especially in places like this, and that there is pretty much a steady stream of people that go up on that mountain all the time in different places. And I know a lot of the different places. Not that many people actually climb to the top. It is 14,000 feet, and it's a rough climb, but there are some other places, more like 9,000, 10,000, that you can walk around. But there's places all the way around it because the mountain it's about a mile wide at the base.
It's the largest mountain in North America, circumference wise.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
it's
That's
just
right.
amazing. And then of course, drinking the water that's filtered through the mountain is always a spectacular gift.
Mhm.
So when I was leaving this time, and one of my excuse me, one of my emissaries, my emissary from Taiwan and her husband were there, and we're saying goodbye, and we're both saying, I can't wait to come back. I can't wait to come back. And she's coming back with a group of people from Taiwan next year, and I'll go also with a group, but I wouldn't even have to go with a group. It's just to be there.
I feel the same way. I feel the
Yeah.
exact same way. And so what information have you gotten regarding Telos and the people who left when Lemuria was going down, ended up at Mount Shasta, and embodied, not embodied, at this point?
Yeah.
Can you help us understand that a little bit?
Well, I'm probably not the right person to tell the Telos story, but I'll tell you my feeling of the Telos story. Um, the people that are very into the Telos tales, like Aurelia Louise Jones, who was one of the first people to go up there and feel the beings and channel the energy. And she wrote several books on Telos. One talks about dragons, the dragon that she met up there, that there is a city inside the mountain, and it's a multi-dimensional city, so it's not like hollowed out and there are humans that never see the light of day, that everything is energetic inside the mountain. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, people ask me if I've ever seen beings or lights or um, any of that, and I haven't, but I have had experiences there that like I was perfectly fine going to sleep there because it was the right experience for me.
Mhm.
And other experiences that absolutely verify that there is something there.
Yeah.
And I've never met anyone who came off that mountain not feeling something,
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
you know, something,
Yeah.
even if
I,
it was only the beauty of nature.
mhm. Oh yeah. And oh man, getting up, I got up after my event. I stayed a couple of extra days, and one day got up super early, just really right after sunrise, and went up to Panther Meadows, and
Mm,
everything was just in full bloom. And
yeah.
I mean, you can't even put into words
No, and
how
you can't take
spectacular.
pictures of it either. It just doesn't come out the
Yeah,
same.
it's
Yeah.
true. It's true. The pictures really don't add up at all. But
Yeah.
well, that's interesting because that's sort of my stance as well. I don't know about Telos. I just thought maybe
Yeah.
your connection with the Pleiadian mothers might lend some light on that. Well, let's segue a little bit into uh what this new Lemuria, because I want people to walk away with something else to focus on
Mm.
rather than all this stuff that's flying around.
There's plenty of that.
Yeah. So
Let's have something else.
what can we focus on in terms of a vision of what we can create together?
What the Star Mothers have told me is that our world, and I mean us in our little worlds all over the big world is going to more and more be focused on frequency and vibration. And we're going to become more and more aware of all of that. Our words, the music we listen to, the things we watch, the food we eat, how we feel in any given moment, checking into our frequency, the people that are around us, and what we put forth in the world, that is going to be really what we create, is that, as because we're going from a third dimension.
I like that word, dimensity.
Dimensity. I just
You heard it
created
here
the word.
first, folks.
Yeah. Third dimension density to fourth to fifth dimension. And as we do that, we're not going to like float away or vaporize. We're going to be able to hold that energy, because we are, as a carbon-based beings, like the whole world is 18% carbon-based, we're going to become more crystalline based and less carbon based. So in order to do that, and if you ever look at a crystal inside, you can see that stuff's happening in there. It's still growing and changing, even though we may have plucked it out of the earth and out of its natural habitat, but it's still changing energy. So we, as beings of energy, are changing that too by the frequency that we're around. We know if we if we have a very high frequency, it will shatter glass or crystal. But as we begin to embody ourselves higher frequencies, we will have a shift, and we won't implode or explode. We'll be able to take on those higher frequencies and amalgamate them, meld them, and as we morph into the more crystalline human. The Star Mothers call it the evolution of the crystalline human. And it might happen anyway if we don't focus on it over time, like, the Ice Age happened over long, and the dinosaurs and all that. But we can, because we're conscious of it, we can create that happening in a shorter amount of time, if we want to, if we choose to. And that as we do that, we become more and more aware of what we create in the world. And it's not like, oh, I got to be careful, I don't want to think that, or it's the significance that we give to what we create. So I was really feeling like, okay, if I'm going to say this, I have to really mean it. So sometimes there's something that we think about someone, or we say about someone or something, that's pretty negative. But it's how we feel in the moment. But how much significance do we give to it? Do we dwell on it? Or do we go, on with our life? So that will be the difference. That will be the difference. It's not that we're not going to have human emotions.
Right.
We are. But how much significance are we going to give to that? Are we going to, like, keep going and keep pushing? Or are we going to say, oh, what was that? Bye.
Mm-hmm.
And be okay with it. And really just be okay, having a human moment.
That is such a great...
There you are.
That is such a great distinction. And I think, it's very easy for people to get on a track of thinking and believing. And the next thing you know, they have created such a morass of negativity for themselves that they've gotten too far down the rabbit hole and they can't get back out.
Yeah.
And perhaps, this is one of the things that the infinity wave is helpful with, is to break a pattern like that by delivering, 10th dimensional love and compassion into the moment. So that can break that negative chain. But the understanding that if you're going on, or anybody's going on and on about a particular topic, like a lot, it's going to create a web, you know.
Yeah, it creates a field.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, it's okay to have the emotion, the feeling, whatever, even the point of view, but as you say, how much significance do you want to give it? I think that's a wonderful
And I
decision.
think that for most of us, there's this place where, when we're supposed to feel, like we're doing all perfect things and saying nice things and never putting anything negative out into the universe. And then if we do, we have all this shame, which just compounds it
Right.
instead of, oh crap, I was just having a human moment.
There you go.
Laugh about it. It's like, wow.
There you go. Oh, I love that so much. I love that. Well, listen, let's see if there's some questions. Is this a
Yeah,
good time for
happy
you
to
to,
do that.
you want to do that? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me shift things around again. There used to be, geez, it's different now. Okay, hold on. Let me do this. Darn. How do I get back to gallery view? Jenny, how do I get back to gallery view?
Jenny.
Oh, I know. I see. I did. Okay, there we are. All right. So, folks, do you have a question, a burning question for Amber? Because she is ready to.
Write it in the chat also.
You can write it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. There's Jody raising her hand. So come on, Jody. Let's see your face. There you go.
Calm down.
Asking you to unmute. There you go.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. Thank you. I really enjoyed listening to you, and what I want to say about that, I do have a question, but before I ask my question, I want to just tell you that um, I- I'm trying to say this in the right way. When you watch people speak, what they're saying and what they're presenting comes through, they're clear. But what also comes through is who they are. Their personality comes through. And even though they're giving a talk on something else, you still get a sense of them. And there's something about you that's so clean and so present and just really beautiful, like you have nothing going on, like there's no like ego personality kind of, it's just really beautiful. So it was very soothing and lovely listening to you. But so thank you for that. But what I wanted to ask you is, I hear a lot of people over the years talk about Lemuria, and what I wanted to know was, what's so special about Lemuria besides the fact that it existed, yes, and people, a lot of people now are from there, they identify with it. But what did Lemuria offer that's so special that the people now are going like, oh wow, I'm from Lemuria? Like what does it offer now? And then the other question is, why did it go under? Like, what exactly happened there about, what it went under? And the last question is, were the people from Lemuria Pleiadian? Is that where they were from? Those are my three
Okay.
questions. And thank you.
And thank you so much for what you said in the beginning. That was lovely. And I'm really honored to be here. So let's start with going under, the going under part of Lemuria. So before the Star Mothers, Pleiadian Star Mothers came, they have such a zoomed out vision of time and space. They knew that this continent of Lemuria was not always going to be there. They knew the geology. And what happened was that they needed to come and do their thing and then go do their next thing. And so they picked a time in our history where that was possible. And the people of Lemuria were not Pleiadians, they were southeast Pacific Islanders, like anywhere else in the South Pacific. So they weren't Hawaiians. They probably didn't even know they were Pacific Islanders. It was long enough ago, but it was a continent that had been created over a long period of time by lava coming up from underneath the earth. And it's still doing that today. What happened under this big continent was the main magma bubble. So the mountain Mauna Loa goes all the way down to the bottom of the ocean anytime. And when the magma bubble inside of it started to move, it pushed through, and the tectonic plates were also moving. And the ice caps were melting. We were going through that at that time. That created the continent sinking because there was not the support of that magma bubble underneath it. The volcano didn't explode. This is one of the really interesting things about the volcanoes on Hawaii. They're always active, but they are what they're called SEAM, S-E-A-M volcanoes. So they're always, breaking open and having lava coming out here and there. And that's always forming new land, but it's also releasing pressure. So I've actually been in a boat around the bottom of the big island when that was happening. And it's just incredible to watch the lava come out and hit the ocean, and then all of what happens. And then, sand comes, blows across the currents, carrying a little bit of seeds from somewhere, and animals get blown off course, and pretty soon a new place is formed. Now, not all of Lemuria disappeared, and not everyone left. So so we've got Lemurians were Lemurians, just like we could call them Hawaiians. The Star Mothers came from Pleiades, and they created these together, gave birth to divine humans. And that was their mission, to give divine human made in Lemuria to the rest of humanity. Okay, I think that was 1 and 2, and now I forget 3. Could you tell me the third question again, please?
Yes, but I just want to ask you, many people discuss our history and how we got here, and they discuss that some Anunnaki thing came from somewhere and created us, and took the apes and their DNA and created us. And that's how we got here. They took the local humanoid, which basically was a Bigfoot type thing, and added their DNA and created us. And you're saying that the Star Mothers are saying that the Pleiadian came to the Lemuria and mixed their DNA and created us. So the first Anunnaki story is false?
No, I don't think that any creation story is false if you believe it.
Right.
I think you have to find what resonates with you, what makes sense to you. As I said earlier, I grew up Catholic. Lemurians were the furthest thing from my mind, or Anunnaki or lizards or any of that stuff. But this story, this feeling said yes inside of me. And that's why it has kept growing, because it
Yes.
resonates with me. So.
Yes, it's the resonance, right? And I thank you for taking it out in the world. And the last question that I asked before is what's the lesson or the wisdom that Lemuria offers now for the people who are reincarnated to be here now? Is it that they're taking the Lemurian wisdom to make the world better now? Is that why they're here now?
Well, I would say in general, yes. And, that shows up in every way possible, that, each one of us, it's like, when that story, when you have 5 blind people touch an elephant and they all describe these different things. that's how our wisdom from Lemuria is being manifest in the world now. It's through the filters of this human, whoever it is, and their memory and the gifts that they've brought forward through who knows how many lifetimes. So yeah, it's definitely here to help us. It's not here to prove anything or to try to be better, although, of course, we'd like to be better, but not to, force anything or make anyone believe anything that isn't right for them. If you feel it and it is leading you in the direction that resonates with you somewhere inside, then it's going to help create something different for you, something a higher vibration, and that goes out into the world and lets the rest of the world know what is going on with you and you and you and you and you and all the people here tonight. And there has to be other meetings like this happening on the planet right now. So that's part of the wisdom, is that we have that frequency, that vibration to make a difference.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jody, and good questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Arma, you wanted to ask a question?
I was not going to say anything until Jody asked her question. Aloha and mahalo nui loa for being with us tonight, Dr. Amber. I am listening to your sacred song on Spotify. I love the We Are the Women. So I'm just starting to listen to it. I'm always inspired by who comes on, and lovely. My whole home is aloha vibration. My spirit is aloha. I also Native American, and I have no Native American in this lifetime that I know. I'm Polynesian, so that's my parents are born in Indonesia, but parents regardless. That's where my incarnation is. And I want to answer Jody in that. Jody, great question. And I wasn't going to say anything about Lemuria. That so resonates with me, because what that does for me is it supports me in who I am. That I'm in Wisconsin. I would love to open an Aloha Center here. I would love to build bamboo houses to prove that housing can be sustainable with bamboo that grows 3 years. That's an incredible kind of a beautiful crop that we can coexist with. And it gives me, if I could go to Hawaii every year, I would. What I've learned about this incarnation and not being able to do that is that I bring the aloha here to me and to those that I encounter and that I meet. And I bring that. I see some heads nodding. They understand exactly what I'm talking about. Why do I grow my hair long? Why do I, it's so, I've taken up Hawaiian dance, language. I have relatives there. So I just want to say it's just incredibly supportive to me to know that that is home. That's where I find home. I also find Sedona home, completely opposite, no water. Dr. Amber, you're nodding your head. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the first time I went to Hawaii, I was actually living in Alaska. And a friend of mine said, "You want to get out of here for a couple of weeks?" I said, "Yes." And we flew from Fairbanks to Honolulu. It was a 5-hour flight and arrived in a completely different world. And when I got off the plane, and it's a stairway, it wasn't a jet bridge, all covered, and I smelled something. Now you have to remember, I'm in the airport, right? It's jet fuel, but I smelled earth. I smelled the earth, and the word, I'm getting full body chills. The word that came was home. And so for many years, I did that Fairbanks to New York thing. And even, let's see, yeah, I have been on all the islands, and it always feels like home. It just always feels like home. And that was before I knew anything about Lemuria at all.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Same with me as well. And the first time I got off of the plane, my grandfather used to live there. My aunt is a resident artist in Waimea, lives in a tree house, best avocados ever. First time I got off in Hawaii, my watch broke. And I thought, oh my gosh, how does a watch break? And I worked for IBM at the time. And the message was, first of all, you're on island time. But second of all, you're not on any time. And I have never worn a watch since then. And that was decades ago. And that was before I knew anything. But that was enough of a message for me to get that in my heart. So thank you so much for your ohana. So grateful. Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha, goddess. Thank you.
Wow. Well, those are great comments. And let's see if I can do this one more time. There we go.
You're getting good.
I'm getting the hang of it. Very, very interesting stuff. And I have to tell you, so every year I douse about where I'm supposed to go, if I'm supposed to take a group somewhere the next year. And I was told to take a group to Easter Island. And, that's a heck of a trip. That's just, and so the first time I said no, which I usually don't, but I said no, because I was just going to take a group to Peru. And then a few years later, they sent me back to Peru, and they said, this time you have to go to Easter Island. And so we did. And that, I always had this hunch, and I had not done any research on Lemuria, but I had this hunch that Easter Island was somehow a remaining tip of the continent. And then as we got closer to the trip, I thought, I don't even know if there are any maps of Lemuria. Let me just go and see. And sure enough, it was the southeastern tip. And I thought, okay, so that's why we're going here. And of course, we ended up discovering what our mission was when we got there. But it also had a wonderful, wonderful feeling. But I've never been to Hawaii, and I've always wanted to go. And I don't know why, it just hasn't worked out. But I'll get there. I'll get there.
When the time is right.
Time is right. Anyway, Amber, do you have any parting comments or and talk about your programs in case anybody wants to sign up or find
Yeah.
your website? All that. They have your website for the most part, but
Well, I really am blown away, and I say this in all humbleness, by this next Lemuria program, because it's filled with stuff I had no idea about. And again, it's blueprints and templates and light codes, but it's also, how do we become this crystalline human that we are taking steps to raise our own vibration, raise the vibration of the planet, bring in the light. I think a lot about that of Shabbat's Shalom, the Friday night Jewish around the table where they bring the light in. It's so beautiful. And that's us in a mass scale, is bringing in the light and sharing that with each other. And the communities that have formed like this inside of the things that I teach, I love every single one of those meetings. It's never work to be there. I leave like I will tonight, like so invigorated by that. And for me, that says something, and not about me. It says something about the value of what we're doing, where we're going, and that we're doing it together. So like I said, I have the shamanic teaching wheel, I have the dragons of Mu, and I have this beautiful new program, the next Lemuria. And I really believe we're here to do that. It was quite some time ago that the Star Mothers told me that Lemuria was actually what we metaphorically, biblically call the Garden of Eden. And the whole good and evil thing, just throw that out. The masculine and feminine, because that's what we were there to do, was to honor and empower the divine feminine. We weren't there making lots of male babies. We were making lots of female babies who could make more female babies, who could teach the world the value of balance between masculine and feminine. And that's what we need. It's not just that the women should be doing everything. Nah. The men, there's so many men that are wounded and disenfranchised, as many as women, but they've been pushed out into the world in a whole different way. But it's about the balance and how we bring that into ourselves from our thinking mind and our emotional mind into a balance in the center, and really creating a stronger connection to our own intuitive inner voice, because that's where the magic is. Then we have our advisors, whoever they are, who are happy to guide us, to give us opinions. They're not going to answer things for us, but they guide us to a place where we find our answers, where we find our sweet spots and our gifts. And we celebrate together that we're doing this, however we get there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I encourage everybody to check out Amber's offerings, and if you're feeling a little bit Lemurian yourself, sorry, then she's your gal. And I think regardless of whether we're feeling like we are part of Lemuria or we're a part of Lemuria, they're noble quests regardless to build the new Lemuria. And I mean, it's a different language, maybe different name, but definitely we're on the same track. So it's really beautiful. Amber, would you mind putting your website in the chat, please?
Jenny.
I'm sorry?
Jenny will.
Oh, Jenny.
It's my Jenny. She'll do it.
Um,
It's really easy. It's just my name.
yeah,
Amber
that's
Wolf,
what I thought. Dr.
PhD.
Amber Wolf, right?
No, Amber Wolf, PhD.
Oh, there you go. There it is. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank
It's
you,
helpful
Jenny.
to have the same helpers.
I know. It's magic.
So everybody, I'm gonna now take us back and let's do this little practice together for the UN as our act of service tonight. And everybody, before we do that though, let's have a big show of hands for Amber.
Oh,
Wonderful, wonderful job. And
thank you. You
very,
honor me by
very
having
well
me here.
spoken. Thank you so much for gracing us. And yeah, it's been wonderful. So okay, so let's you can just imagine that iconic building of the UN. And let's just tune into that. Pull that up in your mind. And then really from your heart center, just beam it wherever you feel is most appropriate, around the building, into the building, whatever you like. The point here is to remove whatever is not in flow. And we don't know what the best outcome is, but we know when we apply love and compassion at this level, it tends to deliver an outcome that is in the highest and best for all concerned. The United Nations was born from a beautiful idea. I'm not sure that that is still its operating system right now, so perhaps this dose of love and compassion will help to set it back on a path that will follow its original intention. All right, I'm going to just take this one more level. I'm getting the nudge to do this. So if you imagine that all of us are sort of hanging out in the air in a big fat circle around the United Nations, we are creating an infinity wheel, which could look like a 40-petaled flower, let's say. And what we're going to do is let that wheel of infinity waves going into the circle and to the person opposite us. So crossing in the center there, if we just imagine that that starts to rotate, and then we're just going to let it hang out there like a big ceiling fan over the UN. So we can keep working as we go about our lives. Well, I certainly feel that at the very least coming together with you in that practice is powerful. So thank you, everyone, so much. And I will report back to this kind soul who is very concerned what we did. And then we'll see if there's any movement. Beautiful. All right, friends. Thank you very much for joining us tonight and sending you all lots and lots of love. Thank you again to Amber. And I really hate to say goodbye, but it's time.
Thank
Mwah.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Aloha nui loa.
Aloha. Bye-bye.